My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you're interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
CORK, the Conference on Osteopathic Research and Knowledge, is a conference designed to lead osteopathic medicine into the future. This will be a gathering of all those interested in advancing the field of osteopathic medicine through the use of evidence-based practices. It will bring together the professionals who have laid the foundation for osteopathic research and those who are revolutionizing the field through their trailblazing research. Featured speakers will include world-renowned osteopathic physicians, international osteopaths, and research scientists who have devoted their careers to the work of advancing osteopathic medicine. CORK anticipates supporting all levels of osteopathic trainees and physicians as they delve into osteopathic research, from study design to manuscript publication. CORK will offer mentorship, resources, and the tools to support. We eagerly welcome research scientists who wish to partner with us to spark progress. Please join us this June for the inaugural CORK conference.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gianna Petrillo, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at the New York Institute of Technology, College of Osteopathic Medicine, and you are listening to the DO or Do Not podcast. This week's episode features two graduating fourth-year medical students, Madison Salvitti and Ethan Kremer, who will share with us their medical experience doing osteopathic research in Europe. The trip was facilitated by Dr. Jordan Keyes, an NYIT Osteopathic Manipulation practitioner who was interviewed in episode 106. Madison and Ethan flew to Italy and spent 3 weeks in Milan and Pescara, participating and learning about osteopathic research in Italy. They will share their experiences seeing firsthand how the diplomats of osteopathic medicine practice side by side with conventional MD practitioners to help facilitate the care of neonates and children. They will explain how DOs in Europe differ from those in the US and the things they feel that we can learn from them. Finally, Madison will speak about her path to a competitive surgical residency, while Ethan will give advice on the emergency medicine match and how to choose the right hospital. I know you will enjoy this episode.
Ethan and Madison, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you
for
having
us.
All right, guys. So basically, the reason that we are having you on the podcast today, other than the fact that you're awesome, Dr. Jordan Keyes, who is really focusing on osteopathic research, or more specifically, research on osteopathic manipulative therapy, gave us your information to talk to you and share your story with our listeners. So can you both briefly introduce yourselves and then tell us in 2 seconds what your plans are for next year, because you're both finishing up.
So yeah, I'm Ethan Kremer. I'm a fourth-year student at NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine, usually from outside of Albany, New York. Next year, I'm going to start my emergency medicine residency at VCU in Richmond, Virginia.
I'm Madison Salvitti, also a fourth-year medical student at NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine. I'm originally from South Central Pennsylvania, big Penn Stater, went to Penn State, and then I will be doing my general surgery residency at Mainline Health in Philadelphia.
You spoke a little bit offline, Madison, so I'm generally politically incorrect, but I'm going to ask a very politically correct question. Can you tell me, Ethan and Madison, what is your relationship?
So we are just friends. We met on our softball team, our beer league softball team in medical school.
All right, awesome. I just want to get that out of the way in case people are wondering. Just brush that aside. Again, the main reason that we have you on is Jordan Keyes told me about this awesome research experience / trip that you went on. And so can you just start by telling me how you even found out about this, what made you interested in it, and then tell us a little bit about the trip?
So a lot of our friends are doing the scholar program at NYIT, so they're taking a research and teaching year. So my roommate actually is a scholar, and her and I were talking about she had met some Italian researchers at convocation, I want to say like a year ago. And we were talking about research and how they do research in Italy. And since she couldn't go with me, like go to Italy and do it, we were trying to find opportunities with which we could do research in osteopathy because both her and I are big into research, and we were like, this is so cool. Like, you don't really see it in America. All of the citations are from like the Spanish flu in like 1917. So it'd be really cool to go and see research in osteopathy in real life. And then trying to find someone to go with, I was like, well, many of my friends aren't graduating with me. So I was like, Ethan, do you want to go to Italy? And he was like, in what capacity? And then we chatted with Dr. Keys about it, and it moved more from a experimental research to more of a doing osteopathy in Italy with a research component and getting to see a day in a life of an osteopath in Italy. Would you say that's kind of how you got on board, Ethan?
Totally.
This is your fourth year of medical school. You have applications, you have audition rotations, you have so many other things to do. And this sounds like an awesome experience. And obviously, you have requirements from the school. Was that easy to set up? Did Dr. Keys help you? Is that how it happened? Or was it just like everything was already done for your residencies and it was just like, let's go?
So we specifically planned the rotation around our required rotations. So both of us knew that by the month of March and April, we would have already matched. We would be done with all of our sub-Is in emergency medicine and surgery. So we knew it would be a good time of year to do it because otherwise we would either be doing an online rotation in radiology or addiction medicine, or we would be on one of our pauses anyways. So we just thought it was a great time to do it.
Now, if you just wanted to go to Italy, I assume you could just get a backpack. You have a break in medical school. I'm sure you could find a couple of weeks and go backpack around Italy. And so that's obviously not a great reason for you to do this rotation just to go to Europe. And you're both doing specialties that are generally not felt to be OMM heavy, right? So emergency medicine, the ER docs we usually have on say that it's tough with the time constraints to do manipulation. And surgery is such a hands-on, cut it out and fix it kind of specialty that we have amazing doctors like Dr. Balthazar, who we've interviewed, who do a lot of post-operative treatment for getting people off ventilators and things like that with OMM. But you would think that most surgeons are not doing OMM. Can you tell us a little bit about your interest in manipulation and how that's developed and why you wanted to pursue this in your fourth year of medical school?
I guess I can go first. So Dr. Balthazar is one of my mentors. So kind of osteopathy and surgery has been a topic of conversation for the past 4 years when he had mentored me. But I think more it was, I don't know if this is how it is in every medical school, but I feel like a lacking component of seeing it in the hospital and seeing how it can be like specifically applied to my specialty or even Ethan's. And so I wanted to go over and see who did research in osteopathic medicine. So everything they're doing is evidence-based medicine. And I wanted to see it in a hospital setting where they do it day in, day out, and me just develop my skills. So we were there for 3 weeks, doing it almost every single day, getting better, and then seeing how I can apply it to surgery or just getting better at palpating. Like doing an abdominal exam is so hands-on. And I feel like we did so many visceral techniques in Italy because they're very visceral heavy that I could see the application in surgery just by spending 2.5, 3 weeks doing it every single day, which I don't necessarily think I would have gotten in my medical education had I not gone abroad and done it.
And I agree with a lot of that. To expand on one thing she briefly mentioned, I think a very cool part of this entire rotation was being able to see how the osteopaths in Italy integrate manipulative medicine into their patients' everyday care in the hospital. That's not something we had seen. So we weren't really sure going into our careers how we're going to integrate it into our care. So we kind of got a picture of how we could do that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so two comments I would just make on that for our listeners are one, visceral osteopathy, as Madison pointed out, in sort of my general thoughts on OMM is advanced OMM here in the US. So we have basic techniques that we learn on a regular basis, and then there are sort of really specific sort of advanced techniques, which again, in my opinion, would be cranial osteopathic medicine and visceral osteopathic medicine, which we don't get a great amount of education with in a basic, just because maybe there's not enough time. But when I was a student, I knew I wanted to go into GI. And I actually went into don't tell anybody this, but I went into the NYIT-COM library, and I think I had like a key card, and I photocopied the visceral osteopathy book. We have it on our website, but I really integrated it into my practice, and it's something that's super interesting. So Madison, I think that's very cool.
I think also it's a very abstract technique. Like I know Ethan and I, the first time we did it, we're like, what is this? What are we feeling? Like, how is this helping people? And then doing it day in and day out, because it's really like cranial and visceral. They don't do a ton of musculoskeletal. I mean, like a little bit, but their practice really isn't as focused on MSK as it is in the United States. And so then by the end of it, I'm like, maybe I'm actually feeling that organ now. Like I think like I might feel something. But I mean, it took almost every day for 3 weeks to really start to feel like I was doing something correctly. I don't know, Ethan, if you feel the same way.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
I felt very inadequate.
And I think it's super interesting that we sort of pride ourselves in the United States on the fact that as DOs, we're complete physicians. But I think it's awesome that you had the goal to see it being practiced in an acute care setting, because again, other than hospitals now or residency programs that have osteopathic recognition, I think most programs, you're not going to get those experiences. So
You're gonna have to seek them out on your own. Like I know my residency program is not.
okay, so you've signed up for this program. Dr. Keys is helping you along, obviously. You take some of your loan money and buy some tickets, and you're off to Italy. Tell us you landed, and tell us how this whole thing went.
So we left the day after match day.
Yeah.
So it was kind of also the perfect celebration, our matches.
We drinking on the plane?
Oh, absolutely not. No, we're responsible for that.
We don't drink, we're sober.
So we landed in Milan, and that's where we spent our first 2 weeks of work. In Milan, we did a few different things. I think we did 3 to 4 days working in the Children's Hospital of Milan. We worked alongside some osteopaths who mostly treated in the nursery, in the NICU, in the surgical NICU. And we were kind of just diagnosing and treating the babies every day, and also helping them along with some research that they were doing on the infants. Some of these babies were as young as 25 weeks old.
23. I think we saw a 23 weeker.
I had never thought through our education that we would ever be doing an OMM on such like a vulnerable, sensitive population. But that was very cool. We spent another 3 to 4 days working in some of the private clinics in Milan alongside a man named Andrea, who's an osteopath. He founded the osteopathic school in Milan. So he's a big teacher. He also has some crazy clients that we can't name, but a very influential man in the city of Milan. That was super cool just because we got to experience so many different types of treatments that we have never done, types of diagnoses we've never done either. And it was kind of shocking when we started. We thought like we had the full education, but there was so much that there was for us to still learn. And then the rest of those days in Milan, we went to the Osteopathic University and got some lectures from Dr. Ferrari, who's a neonatologist in Italy. So we kind of got to see how their education works, how their lectures work, how they learn compared to our medical education here in the US.
Before we go on, let me just ask you a few questions that are in my mind that I'm sure our listeners have as well. So my first question is, so you're with osteopaths there. Are those doctors of osteopathic medicine the way they are here in the United States?
So they're also DO, but their DO stands for Diploma of Osteopathy. From my understanding, it seems like you could do it right out of high school. It seems kind of like a bachelor's or a trade degree. They get their degree in 5 years if they're full-time, 6 years if they're part-time.
This is like a second degree. It's, I think, Andrea and one of his other partners, they were all like full-time physical therapists and then went back to school and are osteopaths as well.
Okay, so then as far as their educations, you know what our training is like, and you know what it's like being in a hospital with MD students, obviously, and sure your feeling is that you're just as well trained in, call it materia medicus, right? Your materia medicus is the same as an MD materia medicus. We're looking at the same books. Did you feel like those DOs had the same breadth of knowledge in general medical care that you had? That's my first question. And my second question would be, were there MDs there? And again, would you feel that your materia medicus knowledge or your general medical knowledge was the same as the MDs walking around in those hospitals?
So I think for me, going into this experience, I kind of expected them to really only learn about the diagnoses and the treatments and just the osteopathic kind of stuff. But sitting in on their lectures, they maybe not to the same extent, but they're learning about neuroanatomy and neurodevelopment, neuroplasticity, all the stuff that we covered during our education. Maybe not to the same full extent, but it did seem like they cover a lot of the same things we do, just no pharmaceutical options for treatment, really.
I feel like it's almost like a bachelor's degree level knowledge of medicine. So like they definitely see it, they have an understanding, they grasp it, they do radiology, they have an understanding, but definitely I would not say to the depth that medical doctors and osteopathic physicians here, DOs and MDs in America do. I feel like Dr. Ferrari was very much on a different, he was more of an equivalent to Ethan and I and to you and to MDs in the US than the osteopathy students, but they definitely have a very good grasp of medicine.
And Madison, again, the second part to the question, were you interacting with MDs while you were there? How were they viewing you? And then specifically, I think in the United States, because we don't do it, if you were doing manipulation, say in an allopathic hospital, they'd probably be looking at you a little funny. So what was your interaction with the MDs? And then what was your view on the interaction or the acceptance of the MDs with the DOs that were in the hospital?
The first day we were there, we had a conversation with the Department of Neonatology chair in the Children's Hospital. And I think there are a lot of parallels in the way they view osteopaths as the way as MDs view osteopathy in the United States. The difference being, I think, that they were a little more open-minded. And once they saw the research that the team was doing to back up their osteopathic care on neonates, immediately they were on board, wanting to be a part of it, wanted to fund the research, or wanting to like really be the center and the hub to show that osteopathic manipulation is so beneficial for neonates and could be a fantastic adjuvant therapy to their current medical care. So we were referred to as they're the American doctor. So like it was very much, we were the equivalent, the MDs in the Italian hospital, but I feel like the osteopaths, they were integrated into care better. Once they showed that it worked and it was backed up with research, they were immediately part of the team and were welcomed, able to do their treatments and able to treat the babies. And there was no discrimination once the MDs were on board with it. It was, I think, a lot more accepting.
Yeah, on kind of like an everyday, there's not a ton of interaction between the medical team and the osteopathic team for each patient. So I think there's kind of just this understanding that they're not going to get into each other's way. They're each going to do their own thing to benefit the patient. And that's kind of the best way to help their patients heal.
So maybe if I could make an analogy and you tell me if it's correct, if I'm rounding in the hospital, there's a medical team rounding in the hospital, and then maybe the physical therapist is coming to see the patient every day, or the nutritionist is coming to see the patient every day. They may talk every once in a while, but they're not all rounding together in a big group. Is that right? Or
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a part of the treatment. It's not part of the medical care, but it is part of the rehabilitation care. So you're absolutely right. I would say it was very similar to that type of feeling.
it's so interesting to me from your story that AT still is an American, right? This is an American philosophy. This is an American developed treatment modality. To find a DO doing manipulation here in a hospital specifically would be very rare. What were your thoughts of the fact, and again, you knew about it obviously because you were going there, but when you see these practitioners in the hospital, what were your thoughts on that?
I think it's kind of a shame that we don't have them in the US as adjuvant. We got to see firsthand the benefits that the patients were seeing and how they could work as a team. So it was kind of a shame that there aren't more osteopathic physicians in the United States working with the physical therapists to provide better patient care. And I don't know if it's because of our health system model or people just don't want to like osteopathic OMM residency. But it was kind of sad because it was so beneficial for the patients that if that was an additional adjuvant treatment, I could refer, if I have a patient with post-op ileus, I could just do a PT consult and an OMM consult, like be just another person trying to help my patient. Whether I do it or whether someone else does it, it would be so beneficial for patient care. It was kind of sad that that's not how that works in the United States.
Yeah. And it seems like the biggest difference is the research that the Italians are putting into osteopathy. And that's really not something that osteopathic schools in the US are doing. They don't have the money to do it, or people just aren't interested in doing it. And that's kind of the biggest reason why they're allowed to work in these hospitals over there. They go to the program leads, the head of the program, and they show all this research they've been doing and explain why it would be beneficial for their patients for there to be osteopaths in the hospital. And once these program leads see the research, they can't really deny it. They almost have no choice but to make the decision to allow the osteopaths to work.
Ethan, just a few other questions. Again, I'm so curious before we move on. I really want to hear about the rest of the trip, but can you talk to us a little bit about what type of Madison mentioned visceral and that there was a lot less musculoskeletal, which is really what we focus on in the US. Can you tell us a little bit about what type of treatments, just from a bird's eye view, not specific treatments, but what type of treatments you were doing? And then if you could just make a little comment, Madison. Interestingly, one of the issues always in surgery for research is how do you do sham surgery, right? It's a problem for surgical research sometimes because it's not very ethical to cut someone open and look around and not do anything and then compare it to someone else where you're doing something. That's a real issue. And I would think manipulation is similar. Do you do sham manipulation as a placebo, or how does that work? So if you have any ideas on that, maybe you can comment on that after Ethan.
So specifically for the babies, what we did essentially for diagnoses with this research going on, one hand at the top of the head, one hand under the sacrum. And it took us days to figure out what they were trying to teach us. But with kind of some simple compressions between the two hands, they're able to judge which areas of the baby have a dysfunction, whether that be the cranium during birth or the GI system, because they're so young and immature. And then from there, just kind of indirect, very gentle myofascial techniques, very indirect. There's no muscle energy or anything like that, but some counter strain, kind of fold and hold type techniques to help the baby feel more free, I guess.
And then Madison, can you comment on the basic ideas of research and
what Francesco Serratelli at the University of Chieti is doing is they actually did sham OMM. So they randomized patients into two groups. So either they got an osteopathic manipulative treatment and those who did not. And I mean, most people don't know if they've done osteopathic manipulative treatment done before. So they don't know if they're getting treated or not. So very much he would emulate the same way he was treating his patients, but not applying any force. Like the patients didn't know anything, with the caveat that if they did get treated with this like sham treatment, they would get treated after. And so then they actually do functional MRI studies on their brain, and they are able to localize where their treatments were working, targeting like the parts of the brain that were lighting up during their osteopathic treatments. And so they were able to show in their research that osteopathic treatment does influence like brain behavior through their functional MRI studies. It's really cool. And so I think a lot of people are not familiar with OMT. So you could do a similar type study in surgery. You could do a similar type treatment where you're treating post-op ileus, but you have a group with OMT and the normal bowel reg, and then those who don't get OMT. So I think it is possible. It takes more planning, but they did it in Italy and they got great results and were able to quantify their treatment with an fMRI study. And it was so cool. We got to sit on their lab meeting and see the plans that they had for the future. And like they're very much revolutionizing the validity of osteopathic manipulative treatment. It's something that we could take here in the United States with our patient populations and reproduce and just show that it really is valid and is a great adjuvant to medical care.
And they published a study with this fMRI machine. To go back to your question about the sham versus the real, in that study, they were comparing patients who were in the MRI machine and they had the osteopaths touching the feet and had them think about OMM and compared that to still patients in the MRI machine. And the osteopaths had their hands on the feet, same place, same pressure and everything, but they had the osteopaths thinking about anything other than manipulative medicine.
Yeah,
and there was a huge difference between those two MRI results. So I thought that was super cool. So they were doing the same exact thing. They were just thinking about something else, and it was a complete different result.
Maybe some of our listeners are thinking this is nonsense and a little wacky, but my favorite research, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend the book. It's kind of old at this point, but Herbert Benson is, without going into a big soapbox on Herbert Benson, he's an MD PhD from Harvard, and he wrote a few books. He's done a lot of research. One of my favorites is called Timeless Healing. It talks about placebo response and prayer healing, which I usually more focus on the placebo response with my students. And again, it's just very interesting stuff and really head-scratching stuff. But the importance, using Herbert Benson for an example, the importance of using a sham therapy, placebo response is huge. Just the patient feeling that the doctor's treating them has healing properties in and of itself. So it's always important. And again, these are hard in surgical, and I would guess OMM physical therapies, that you have a placebo group where the patient is getting some sort of treatment to remove the effect of placebo, which we know is very potent. So let's go on. Madison, tell us where you went from there after you left Milan.
Yeah, so we hopped on a train and pit stopped Venice to kind of visit Venice on our way to Pescara.
In Venice, there's no OMM in Venice. There's just like a gondola ride. That's
It was me getting a lot of bug bites and eating and drinking. And it was Easter, so we had a 4-day weekend, so we got to explore. We got to do Italian vacation.
Both just matched, and you're doing the good work of AT still. I think you deserve to have some cannolis. I'm cool with that.
Oh yeah, and some wine. Every wine's cheaper than water, so we're like, we're not going to waste money. We're economically, savvy. So then we went to Pescara, which is on the Adriatic Sea. I'd never heard of Pescara previously, but it is beautiful. It is right on the sea, and it was gorgeous. And so we got there, we spent 2 days in clinic with Francesco, and then went to the University of Chieti where he does his research, and got to go to a lab meeting, see what they're doing research-wise and their plans for the future. They're in the process of publishing. So we kind of got to listen in on their plans. And then we got to tour the facilities, look at the fMRI machine. NYIT's getting one. So we got to meet the team. They have physicists. They have neuroscience PhDs. It's like a whole collaborative effort. And then we went back to Pescara. This was in Chieti, which is like about 20 minutes inland. And then we met with another research group. So Francesco is doing a lot of research. That man has his hands. He has many, many hats and is very, very brilliant. And we met with another one of his team that does thermal research. So they have like a thermography video camera that tests all of the sympathetic and parasympathetic responses. And so he's doing that with osteopathic treatment and looking at how it affects the autonomic nervous system. And so we met with that team as well, which was really, really cool. And then we were done. We had a few days to enjoy Italy and travel a little bit, and then we flew back.
That sounds spectacular. So let's say, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but let's say someone listening is in osteopathic school and is like, holy moly, I never even thought about doing this. I want to do that also. How would they get some information?
It took a lot of planning. So like we say we got to go in March, but this idea manifested July of the previous year. So it took a lot of planning to coordinate, a lot of agreements. But I mean, hopefully this will be like an ongoing rotation with our school. They would have to reach out to Dr. Keys, or if there ends up being some sort of application in the future for this, that would be how they would be able to get involved.
Yeah, but I think generally across the country, it's not something that is very common. We just found something that our school was just starting. So we're starting research with the same MRI machine on the same topics. So it was of value to our school and for us to go and have this opportunity. So I think for people around the country at other osteopathic schools, just finding something of interest to yourself, to your school, something that will help benefit osteopathy in the US, and see if the school will go for it.
Yeah, I think asking is the big. If you don't ask, it'll never happen. So we just kept asking and kept pushing, and kind of we wrote like a 10-page proposal for them to like take us seriously and let us go. And we backed it up with research that we found, but asking, like finding something, trying to create on your own, and then asking your school leadership. Like we're lucky that we had Dr. Keys and our dean who were very, very supportive and made it happen. And our Dr. Niwagaba, our like international rotation person. So like the three of them really, after we presented this, they were very supportive, and we kept asking and we kept saying how it would benefit the school. And they almost a year later got on board and were able to do this for us. So we're very, very, very thankful that our school supported it.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to shift gears. First of all, that is cool. Thank you so much for going. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Madison, tell us where you grew up and when you decided you wanted to be a doctor, where you went to college.
So I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania. So 38 years ago, it was basically all farmland. Now it's not like that anymore. I grew up in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. So it's like 30 minutes north of Baltimore, an hour south of Harrisburg, the capital. Small town, not so small anymore, but I went to Penn State for my undergrad. And then I went to grad school at University of Pittsburgh, School of Medicine, got a master's in biomedical science and like my NYIT. But I kind of always wanted to be a doctor, so I'm told. My parents got one of those doctor sets, and I guess I was just doing whatever 5-year-olds do. But I kind of always wanted to be a doctor. I went to Penn State, started out pre-med, wasn't really sure if I wanted to do it anymore, switched to bio, went to grad school and was like, yes, I want to be a doctor. This is absolutely what I want to do.
Did you apply to med school after college?
So I did. I shouldn't have. I got some pretty poor advising, actually. And they were like, oh, just apply, see what happens. $7,000 later, didn't get into medical school. So you don't just apply and see what happens. That's not what you do.
Did you apply to DO schools or just MD schools at that point?
I applied both, like a few DO schools. I was very selective. I wanted schools with resources. So I applied to P-COM, NYIT, like some of the big ones. Didn't get in the first time. I mean, I know why I didn't get in. I shouldn't have applied now. Like hindsight's 2020.
Yeah. So it's a post-bac program that you went to? Is that what you call it? Or?
Yeah, it's a master's program. So it's a master's with an emphasis, and it's for people who want to go into some sort of like professional school. If you're not entirely sure whether it be PT, OT, PhD, it's a feeder program. So it's very much, they have requirements, but it's also tailored to what you want to do. I honestly owe my getting into medical school to that program. They did a fantastic job.
And what school was that?
University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Yeah, it's their biomedical science master's program. Great. The advising there is top notch.
If somebody finishes college and they decide they want to go to med school, you think that's a great place to go?
Yeah, or even if like they're not sure, like PT school. Like I had friends who went to PT, DO, MD, OT, every PhD programs. They set you up for success, and they're very honest with you. I think that's the big key. Is if they sometimes tell you what you don't want to hear. Like if they don't think you should apply because of this deficit, they will tell you that. Their advisors definitely give you a lot of tough love, but I don't think I would have gotten to medical school without them.
So tell us when you found out about osteopathic school and then what that application process looked like after your master's.
I knew about osteopathic medical school. It was like one of the options that they, like, on your route to becoming a physician, you could apply to MD or DO, and they were like, apply to both. Just make sure you're happy and the school fits what you're looking for. So I ended up at NYIT. I had a friend who ended up at Kansas City, but it was very much look at the program and make sure that they have the resources and that you want and match where you want to match. So I wanted to match in the Northeast. At that point, I wasn't really sure surgery, but they were matching internal medicine because I thought I am at the time. And they matched well. NYIT matched well, and they had resources. It was in a big city, so it kind of was a no-brainer. I didn't apply to many osteopathic medical schools. There were really only ones that I could see myself going to. I applied to 4 and then got into NYIT because it looked like every other school I was applying to. That was kind of with the addition of osteopathic, which I thought was cool. I was like, oh, awesome. Again, at that point, I thought like internal medicine. I was like, oh, great. Like, this is an awesome additional skill set to have. I never thought surgery at the time. So that's why I chose NYIT. I mean, it was also then you get in where you get in. I got waitlisted a ton of other places. And then NYIT offered me an acceptance. So I was like, yeah, sure. I get to be a doctor. It seems like they're going to give me a great education. Awesome.
I'm totally supportive. It sounds like a great thought process to choose. And then tell us surgery is like badass, right? Surgery is top. And everybody's like, can you go to osteopathic school and get a surgical residency? So obviously you did. Congratulations. Can tell us a little bit about your application process to surgery?
So I think mine's a little unique. I worked foregut surgery research fellow for about 2 years at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh. So I graduated my master's program. I figured before I applied to med school a second time, I decided I needed more research and then fell into this research position that you needed a master's degree, and end up everyone who was in my position went to medical school. So it's kind of like funneled us. And again, I didn't think I was going to do surgery. I like got in and they're like, Madison, by the time you're done, you're going to like want to be a surgeon. And I was LOL, not a chance in hell. Left, absolutely was like, yeah, I'm going to be a surgeon. Like, thank God I took this job because I left with like 20 publications. So I think that set me up then in medical school because I already knew how to do research. I reached out, I immediately got into medical school knowing I wanted to do surgery, and then started cold emailing DOs in the greater NYC area to do research with them. That's how I met Dr. Balthazar. And because I just cold emailed him, I found his email on PubMed and then sent him my CV and was like, hey, I want to do research with you. Like, I need a mentor. Like, will you take me? Basically. And he did, and then connected me with like another one of my mentors at NYIT, who's also a surgeon. But you have to be very strategic. I do think you have to take, I mean, you have to take both step 1 and step 2, as well as COMLEX level 1 and level 2, to really not restrict you on where you can apply. I think now at our school, I mean, we are really unique that we started during COVID. So I think there were a lot of inherent lack of opportunities when you go to school during COVID that I think now there are back. But you have to very much advocate for yourself, find mentors, do the research and do high quality research, really learn how to do the statistics yourself, really be involved in the process, and then, get the grades to back it up. You can't just apply and then be like, hi, I want to be a surgeon, and not have the grades, not have the research, not have the mentorship, not have the leadership opportunities. And then you have to really be strategic about where you do your sub-Is. I looked at places that I know would take DOs, but also places I was like realistic about where I was applying based on my board scores and based on where I went to school. I probably wasn't going to match at Harvard. That was not a realistic use of my time. I wanted to stay in the Northeast, and I looked at programs that I would be happy at that I fit, and my program that I'm going to be at, I'm really happy. I rotated there. I loved it there. And so I think you can do it. You just have to be smart, and you have to find mentors to help you. So
That is my comment. First of all, kudos to you. I think that's an awesome story. I think everything you did is awesome. And it's interesting to me. I have some MD surgical residents that rotate through my office, the program that I'm professor at. The surgical residents, for some reason, like to hang out with me for a couple of weeks during some of their lighter rotations. when they come, a lot of times I ask them about their journey. And a lot of them, again, surgery is so hard. Do research years either before or in between. I think that's a very common path. And of course, they all have stellar grades, which I'm sure that you had. And then sometimes hear these DO comments that difficult for DOs to do surgery, which again, I'm not saying that's not true. I'm not that privy. I know GI was very hard and competitive for me, but the bottom line is it's hard for everybody. So again, the MDs that I see that come through doing the same research or pulling the same all-nighters or not going on European vacations during college or medical school, except after they match, Yeah, so it's a lot of time. And, for anyone, I think you did everything right. And again, I'm proud. That's amazing.
Like I said, I think it's very much just I think at MD schools, maybe the resources are there a little more in place, but I don't think it's impossible. I think you just have to be smart and ask for help and advocate for yourself, which I'm sure it's like that everywhere, but I think maybe you have to be a little more intentional about it as a DO. So no one's going to hand you anything in life, but I think being a DO makes you maybe work a little hard.
Ethan, all right, you're up. Tell us where you grew up and where you went to college and when you decided you wanted to be a doc.
My story is a lot less interesting. I feel like born and raised right outside of Albany, New York. This ties into my interest in being a doctor, but I was always like a big sports kid. I was on baseball teams and basketball teams year round, like parents driving me back and forth everywhere. Eventually, my first thought about medicine was in high school, senior year, kind of just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. My sports seasons had ended. I got in contact with the athletic trainer at my high school. Just being on sports teams, I've been with him for the last few years. I shadowed him, worked with him for weeks. He kind of taught me about sports medicine, everything that he does. And it kind of started that interest in medicine. So when I eventually got into college, I went to Cornell University. I started out pre-med. I was kind of like, I'll see if this is for me. We'll go from there. And kind of like halfway through my first year at Cornell, I was like, all right, if I'm going to be applying to med school in a few years, I need to start working on this resume. So I got certified as an EMT. I worked back home in Albany during break, summer break, winter break, whenever I went home. And that's kind of where the emergency medicine all started. I graduated from Cornell in 3.5 years, so a semester early. And during that extra semester, I was going to stay in Ithaca, work as an EMT there. But the very first week, I tore my ACL playing in intramural basketball, which I technically wasn't allowed to be playing because I'd already graduated.
We won't tell anybody.
So I couldn't work as an EMT anymore. I couldn't lift anything. So I went back home to Albany to my parents' house. I had my surgery done there. And I was kind of looking for any kind of sitting job in medicine that I could do while I recovered. I started working as an ER scribe there. And that's kind of where I just went all in on emergency medicine. The attendings there were so willing to teach a student that hadn't even started med school yet. I just fell in love with the environment, everything that they were doing. I came into school at NYIT-COM. I wanted to have an open mind, but nothing really gave me the same adrenaline rush as emergency medicine. I still loved it just as much during my rotations. So that's what I decided to apply for.
So Ethan, a couple of questions before we get into ER. So when did you learn about osteopathic medicine? And then it sounds like you took a gap year that you were scribing. Did you apply out of college? Again, you graduated a little bit early. And then just tell us what the application process looked like.
I had always been aware of DOs in osteopathic medicine. My uncle graduated from NYIT, I want to say 2000, and he lives near me in upstate. So I was always aware of the profession, what he did, how it was different from MD school. So I was always planning on taking a gap year. It just kind of turned into a gap year and a half because I graduated early. I really wanted to put all of my effort into the MCAT. I didn't want to have to take it during my senior year at Cornell. So I decided I was going to get some work experience, take the MCAT when I had a lot more free time and I wasn't in school. So it was planned. And then I applied both MD, DO, but I mostly wanted to stay in New York if I could. NYIT was the only school in New York, specifically near New York City, that I got into. I thought it was a perfect fit.
As far as applying to ER. So first of all, if any of you haven't listened, Matt Nelson is, I think, episode 5. It may be like one of our most listened to episodes. He's a program director at North Shore University Hospital for ER. He's a DO, obviously, and he's a very good friend of mine who's actually my intern in the MICU many years ago, and he's badass. So, I talked to Matt about this last year. There was a lot of coverage, a lot of news feeds last year about the ER match, and specifically the fact that there were a lot of open, unfilled spots. Were you like, this is awesome, I'm going to get a spot? Or are you like, holy cow, maybe I shouldn't be doing ER? What was your feeling when those news feeds came out? And then again, I talked to Matt. He said the match this year was much different than it was last year, much better. So was that a blessing or a curse for you?
First of all, I worked with Dr. Nelson for a month. I did a sub-I with him. He's awesome. I loved working with him.
Yes. If you don't rotate with him and want to be a DO, want to do ER, want to be Matt Nelson, yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
So obviously everyone was shocked by the match results last year. I would say I was a little less shocked because even during my third year ER rotation, I had attendings who were like young attendings, maybe probably in their 30s, who were trying to talk me out of emergency medicine, mostly because of the job prospects after. But I kind of went to other resources, asked them a ton of questions about job availability after, fellowship options, if it helps, if it doesn't. And those conversations reassured me that I would find a job somewhere if I wanted it. And like I had said earlier, I couldn't think of a second specialty that I would go into if it wasn't emergency medicine. So there was a little bit of a, oh, heck yeah, I'm going to match. But it was mostly, this is what I love to do. I'm not going to do anything else because that'll just inspire me to be at the top of my class, get those jobs, that kind of thing.
So then tell us about the application process for ER this year for you.
EM does it a little differently than almost all other specialties. I know OBGYN is kind of following the lead a little bit, but for emergency medicine, we get SLOs instead of other letters of recommendation. The SLO is the standardized letter of evaluation. It's a very objective evaluation of all students who do emergency medicine rotations in their 4th year. So that requires you to do 2 to 3 rotations for us at outside hospitals, since we don't have a home institution. Other students can do 1 to 2 plus a SLO from their home institution. So I did 4 sub-Is, which I think I wouldn't recommend. I think 3 is kind of the perfect number. I made it a main point in my application that I would prefer to leave New York. So it was a ton of research into programs that were outside of the New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania region, because obviously working in New York for the last few years, all the hospitals, where you would feel most comfortable. It was a lot of work to figure out these hospitals I've never been to before. Where will I fit in? Will I fit in? That kind of thing. I did 1 sub-I outside of the region. I did it down in Charleston, South Carolina. I would say if you are trying to apply somewhere outside of the region of your school or where you're from, definitely do a sub-I there. It tells the program that you have an interest in the area, that you're not just doing it for like a vacation or something like that.
Is that the hospital you matched at?
No, I matched in Richmond, Virginia at VCU.
Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
It's level 1 trauma center, middle of Richmond. It's got this huge, new, gorgeous children's hospital that I'll be rotating in when I go to the pediatric ER. It has basically all of the services you could ever ask for as a ER doctor to consult. I think there's 17 interns in my class. 2 of them are EM, IM. There's a few military, so I know VCU takes a few kind of military students every year to fill their class. And I would say, I haven't done the actual count, but I think there's 7 or 8 DO students in the class. So it's not 50-50, but it's very close.
It sounds awesome. Congratulations. That's really, really exciting. So listen, guys, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for telling us about the rotation. Thank you for telling us about the cannolis. Thank you for telling us about your journey. It was a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so much for
having
having
us.
us.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there is someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tianyu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.